Well, the World Economic Forum's annual meeting is this week. I haven't talked about it yet, but I have to say I'm happy that lots of other people are talking about it, even if I haven't. It's getting pretty decent coverage. The World Economic Forum, it's not like Bilderberg to where it gets zero coverage every year. It always gets some. It's just, not a lot of people are ever interested in it. And so not a lot of people talk about it. Like, it gets covered by, Bloomberg and other publications that cater to elites who respect the people in Davos. But now I'm pretty happy to see, there's lots of criticisms. The clips are getting shared around of the crazy things these people say. I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't want to make it about any specific thing, because what you need to know about the World Economic Forum and the people behind the Great Reset agenda, I believe the title of their conference this year is the Davos Agenda, which is pretty funny. It sounds like something that a crazy conspiracy theorist would say. Oh my gosh, you got to watch out for the Davos Agenda. But, the nice thing about these folks is that they're so arrogant in their Bond villainry that they don't feel the need to hide. They just sort of come right out in the open and say, yeah, we want to enslave all of humanity. We want to be their overlords. We're superior to them. They should do what we say because we're better than them. And regular people, their standard of living should drop. They should, become renters, and we will become the landlords for the entire world. They will rent everything from us. That's their agenda. That is why you see, in investment and in business, there's this pivot away from producing goods that I've been talking about, and a shift towards wanting to provide services. If you've got an established business that is a service provider, it's real easy to sell your business right now. Because what big capital is looking for, they want to yield. Because the bond market, fixed income, it's dead. And so they need to get yield from their equity. They want steady income every month coming in the door, and they want that to be paid by all the peons. They want to, and so therefore, everything that you currently own in your life, they view that as rents that they're not making. You, by owning your own car, you're depriving them of the rent that they would enjoy by renting a car from them. The same thing is true if you own your own home. For every person who owns their own home, that's one less a tenant that they can lord over and extract wealth from every month. And I'm not here saying that renting is bad and that landlords are bad and that you should never rent an apartment. That's not what I'm saying at all. There's a time and a place for that. In certain situations, it's more convenient for both parties. There are people who want to rent and not buy things, and there are people who want to lease and not sell things. That's perfectly fine. But these people want to completely eliminate private property. Or at least they want to eliminate it for any regular people. They want there to be a property-owning class, and they want there to be a tenant class. It's a neo-feudalism. This is not a new idea in human history. It's certainly not a new idea in European history. It used to be that the European lords and ladies, they owned all the property. They owned the grain mills, they owned the land, they even owned the women to the extent that, when you got married, your landlord got to sleep with your wife on your wedding night. And so all the Davos crowd, the Great Reset crowd, what they want to achieve is a return to that tradition, to where the peasant class owned nothing. Peasants, they worked every day. They did not own the land that they worked. They did not own the house that they lived in. They did not even own their own bodies. They had to work for the aristocracy just to maintain their existence. There was no getting ahead. There was no advancement. It was purely static. And I guess that's great, if you are one of the select few elite, you have a secured place at the top of the pyramid, and you've got billions of peons to serve you. But I think that these folks, I think they're getting a little too far ahead of themselves. I think that they're getting sloppy. We're not there yet. We're not at the, at the verge of abolishing private property. And so by coming out so openly and making it known what their goal is, the amount of people who are opposed to these folks and who know who they are and want to defeat them is growing rapidly. It's growing exponentially. I remember the first time I heard any reference to the World Economic Forum. It was from Steve Bannon. I'll give him credit. I'm not a huge Bannon fan, but I will give him credit for this. He was the first person I ever heard talk about this. Before Trump was elected, certainly. It was when he had his Sirius XM show in the mornings. He replaced Mike Church, which I liked Mike Church, so I was a little peeved at Bannon for that. But anyway, he would always talk about, the party of Davos. And that, to him, even back then, that was the real boogeyman that, that we had to focus on. Certainly more than, Hillary or Obama. And that's aged well. As the years have gone by, I've realized, what, Bannon got that one right. And it's a really big thing to get right. It is no exaggeration to say that these people are the enemies of humanity. And by exposing themselves, they're doing a great service to us, the would-be peons, the peasants, who they wish to, suppress and keep down forever. Because if we realize that this is their goal, and we can view every little policy thing that they're trying to advance as a part of this goal, whether it be, the lockdowns for the Wu flu or all these environmental restrictions or the promotion of abortion and of, gender fluidity and the erosion of any sort of idea of family values. The Great Reset and the Davos agenda, as Klaus Schwab calls it, it's the framework which allows you to interpret all these individual things and put the puzzle pieces together and see the big picture. The Davos agenda is the big picture, and that's what all these people are talking about. It's not, the climate change agenda is part of it. The quote-unquote public health agenda is part of it, the mass vaccinations. Certainly in this country, abortion and the gender ideology is a big part of it. The whole woke cult, the way in which the far left was co-opted by the corporate establishment. Because remember, the far left, they used to hate all of these people, who are now at Davos. The big bankers, monopolists, large landholders, let alone, what these people are talking about. I mean, the left hates people who own, 50 acres, let alone 50 million acres. The left hates, an old retired couple who own one rental house, and they think that they're being oppressed by their landlord, and they want to go murder this old elderly retired couple who's too old to work, and so they have one rental property or two. The Davos crowd owns millions and millions of units of apartments, and they want to keep growing that and move everybody into the cities like Mao did. And so obviously, the woke ideology is a very important tool to distract the left from that. And so now we're at the point where you really only have, moderates to right-wingers who are at all concerned about the global elite. You've got a minority on the left, the Jimmy Dore crowd, who is, just as, has their eyes as open as ever about how bad these people are. And I think that the fact that so many people are waking up to this and are starting to put the puzzle pieces together is going to allow us a lot more strength to fight the coming onslaught, the next round of this, which is going to be going all the way back to, the climate change nonsense. Because that's the silver bullet. Carbon is carbon is the most important molecule on the planet. It's the building block of life, and it is, the molecule which allows modernity to exist. It is what fuels not only progress, but merely maintaining our current standards of living. I've gone over the past, how all the this alternative stuff like the wind farms and the solar panels and battery cars and trucks and all this stuff is nonsensical, because it necessitates the use of minerals and elements which are far rarer, far harder to come by, far harder on the planet, to process and to mine and extract, and then have to be shipped all across the planet. Much scarcer materials than simple iron and carbon, which is all you need really to produce electricity for homes, power cars. Obviously, for electrical generation, you need the elements to build generators, but those are standby, standard things. It's a little different than the scale in which we're talking about. If every home has solar panels, or if everybody's power comes from a wind farm, or if everybody's car has to have a super high capacity bank of lithium batteries. Heck, I guess we can generate electricity with an electromagnet. So theoretically, if you have carbon, iron, and copper, you should be able to produce electricity. That's what keeps the lights on. That's what allows us to have air conditioning. That's what made the state of Florida, for example, habitable. Before air conditioning, people didn't live here. Before World War II, there was generally almost no one in Florida. People didn't want to live here. Carbon is what has always allowed people to live in cold climates, because burning wood, it's not a fossil fuel, but it's the same concept. Whether you're burning wood or coal or whatever, you're putting carbon into the atmosphere. You're burning carbon. Our bodies are made of carbon, and so by regulating the carbon molecule, or the carbon atom, I should say. CO2 is a molecule. Carbon is not. But carbon in all forms, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, just straight carbon, hydrocarbons, all these things, the carbon in your body. Regulating that atom, that element, and declaring that to be evil. What that does is it gives them a stranglehold over all of humanity, because carbon is a direct product of life. You can't separate it from humanity. You can't separate it from energy. You can't separate it from prosperity. You can't separate it from life. So by restricting carbon, they are restricting our lives. They're restricting us. They're restricting our freedom, obviously. They're restricting our wealth. And, what do all these systems, what do they always have in place? Oh, well, we're going to sell carbon credits. It's going to cost money to use carbon. More than it already costs. We're going to put these massive taxes on it. So billionaires will always have access to carbon. Billionaires will always be able to live. They'll always have their same standard of living. It'll be the rest of us who will have to live in poverty. The peons, the peasants, the people renting apartments from them will have to live in these densely populated cities where we don't need cars. Because, of course, you can't produce nearly as many cars, using all this battery technology and whatnot, because of the rare earth minerals required. It will be us peons who have, regular brownouts or blackouts because either, it was too cloudy outside that day or there wasn't enough wind. But the party of Davos, they will always have access to gas generators, unlike the people of California. They will always have access to their private jets, which, by the way, if you want to talk about carbon emissions, nothing emits more than a jet. In fact, jet engines emit more carbon. They're more, from a standpoint of just burning CO2 and putting it into the atmosphere. Jet engines are far worse than the old two-stroke gas motors that they used, up until the 50s. So if you think about it, that real old technology, you ever see a two-stroke gas motor? It's smoky, it's loud, it's bang, better, better, better. It's very primitive technology. That burns less carbon. than a jet engine, just so you know. You don't see any of these folks putting their private jets away because they don't care. It's not about carbon. It's about you. Carbon is life. They want to take life away from you, and they want to inject it directly into their own veins. These people are vampires. Obviously not literal vampires, but they have a vampiric relationship with the rest of the human population. I mean, I don't begrudge Bill Gates starting Microsoft and having the kind of business that he did. But really, what does he produce? What was it, the great invention of Bill Gates? It was nothing. All Bill Gates did was he bought the rights to different software and packaged them and marketed them. That's all he is, and that is a skill, and that is something that society benefits from marketing, because marketing is the act of trying to pair consumers with products that they might want. But this guy has not, his existence has not been a great boon to society, put it that way. And the same can be said for so many of his peers. They're just narcissistic kleptocrats who want to take and take and take and just gobble up everything they can so that, we can't have it and they can. If you notice, everything that they do, every move they make, even though they're supposed to be altruistic or, what's the term, philanthropic, every one of their little selfless acts, all of their social activism that they engage in, all of their concerns about the world, somehow involve enriching themselves and impoverishing regular people. The more people recognize that, the better, the closer we come to winning. Secrecy is really all these people have going for them. And so if the public becomes more aware to what's going on, you see, the things that they want to do, they're not popular. The only way, how do you sell someone on restricting carbon? Well, you tell them, oh, okay, well, you got to save the trees, or some such nonsense like that, or save the polar bears or whatever. And the only way that we can save the polar bears is if gas is $5 a gallon and everyone is forced to drive a Chevy Bolt. Oh, but we over here, no, we still get to have our private jets. Don't be fooled. Trust me, if there was, if these people thought that they could benefit more, even if, let's take all the climate change stuff for granted. Let's say that it's all correct, and that the experts who were all wrong about the Wu flu, and how we needed to lock down, or else it was going to be, apocalyptic. All those experts who were wrong about that, let's just say that they're completely right about the climate catastrophe that they've been forecasting for decades and decades and decades, going all the way back to the 1960s or 70s. If the elites thought that they could make more money by promoting the use of carbon than by discouraging it, if they thought that they could further their interests by promoting the use of carbon, they would, even despite their belief that, okay, well, if we keep doing this, it's going to be very bad for the planet. These people don't care about the planet. They don't care about things that have, bad consequences, within a year, or, a year down the road, or 2 years down the road, or 3 months down the road. They don't care if it benefits them right now. You think they care about what happens 100 years from now? There have been times in this planet's history where the Earth has been warmer. And there are large swaths of this planet that are relatively uninhabitable because they're too cold. If the Earth got warmer, that wouldn't even necessarily be a bad thing. Maybe it would be a bad thing where I live, but in other parts of the world, let's say you live in, Michigan, where it's frigid in the winter, you might like a little more warmth. And I guarantee you, if the Davos crowd thought that they could, better angle themselves by, burning more carbon, they would be making that argument. They'll make whatever argument they have to in order to control you. But at the end of the day, carbon fuels, fossil fuels, automobiles, single-family homes, these have greatly lifted up the masses and have democratized living standards. The average American today lives better than kings lived, 200 or 300 years ago. And these people hate that. They want you to live in a box and eat your insect-based hamburger and then take high-speed rail back and forth from your cubicle job. It's not that they like all of this green energy, despite the fact that it is less efficient, that it is, less useful, that it restricts your movement and all this, and that it, binds you closer and it's less reliable. These are the reasons why they want green energy. They want to make your life worse. They want the average people to be as poor as possible and to be as downtrodden and desperate as possible so that they're easier to control. I think it's that simple at this point. I'll give you a good example. The cars don't have to suck. You buy a car, it works for a few years, and then it breaks down a bunch, and then you pretty much just have to scrap it because it's not worth fixing. Because, you paid so much for it and, to begin with, and it's depreciated all this, and your taxes, and, the repairs are thousands of dollars, and for that money, you can just go out and buy another car. We have the technology to make cars that will last pretty much forever. I encourage you to Google something called the Grumman LLV. If you've never heard of it, you've seen them. They're the postal carriers that you've seen. And unless you were born, in the 70s or the early 80s, they are the postal carriers that you have seen for your entire life. The Grumman LLVs were, I believe, ordered or delivered right around 1986. It was the late Reagan administration, okay? Reagan was president when the entire fleet of postal carriers was purchased by the federal government. And those vehicles, as you know, run every day. They run mail routes. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of thousands of miles, millions of miles probably, have been put on those vehicles in over 30 years, 35 years now. But believe it or not, they're still in functioning working order. They are simple carbureted four-cylinder engines with no electronics or very little. No electronics certainly on the transmission. No traction control, none of that garbage. And they last. They were built to last. That's what LLV stands for, long life vehicle. It's perfectly feasible for corporations to build cars or other durable goods that last forever. But they don't. You know why? Because they want to keep milking you for more and more money. And so how do they keep competition from doing this instead? How do they keep people from building cars that last forever? Why is it only that the post office can buy a car or a truck or a van, whatever you want to call it, that will last forever? Well, they do it, of course, by controlling regulatory bodies and putting any new competition out of business. The consolidation in the auto industry, for example, happened, I guess you could say, probably during the Great Depression. By the 60s, we were down pretty much to the big three, and that was it. And this is not something unique to the auto industry. Every industry is like this. They put in these harsh regulations to keep out competition so that they can impose high fixed costs and maintain a cartel where everyone agrees we're going to bilk the consumer. And what the World Economic Forum is a global corporate cartel on steroids, where all of these billionaires come together and hash out how they plan on screwing over regular people. Just like the auto industry ensures that consumers can't just go out and buy a car once and drive it for 30 or 40 years with, almost no problems and, are able to maintain it and work on it themselves. The World Economic Forum now plans to try and keep consumers from owning their own homes or owning their own TVs or owning their own clothing even. And the less you own, the more you have to pay in rents every month. The more that, you just can't buy something once and use it. The more you'll be dependent on their weekly wages that they dole out to you. And that's how they are pushing, the once great industrial capitalist economy of the Western world. They've slowly been pushing it back to an economy of lords and peasants. The Industrial Revolution was a miracle. It was, the greatest leap forward in the well-being of humanity in history. And, of course, we're taught about how bad it was in history books and how the working conditions were so bad. Oh my gosh, look at these people who worked in factories. Without giving you any comparison about how destitute those people were to begin with. People were willing to go and work in these dirty cities like, Birmingham in England, not Birmingham, Alabama, because they had a chance of bettering themselves, and because what they were producing was enriching the population. By making shirts cheaper, people were able to afford more than one pair of clothes. Advancements in metallurgy and manufacturing, made farm implements cheap enough to where, people could produce food much more efficiently. Eventually, we got tractors, which were able to replace horses and oxen. Every step of the way, you had people making durable goods, making products which made people's lives easier and allowed them to work less while doing more. And the World Economic Forum's mission is to try and reverse that progress. They want to halt it, and they want to turn back the clock. They want to undo all of the progress for humanity that was brought about by the Industrial Revolution, or rather, I shouldn't say all of it, but they want to rebuild and rekindle the social bonds that existed before the Industrial Revolution. And so, yes, we have all this great technology now that can make people's lives easier, and will make them, in essence, richer, but we just won't allow them, any of the peons, to use it. And so the more people wake up to this, the less likely their chances of success will be. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.